Okay, cool. I think that's started. I will hand over to you, Alex. And
Brilliant. So hello everyone. Welcome to the Oxford Student Union annual election for the position of President of the Student Union. We've got 5 people who are ready to put, no, 6 people who are ready to put themselves forward for the position of President, and we will be interviewing them 5 questions each. We're going to go in the order Marcin, Richard, Kelsey, Enrico, Otto, and then Michael Akaladi. And then we're going to reverse that for the second round of questions, which Andrew will be running. So I'll be doing 1, 3, and 5, and Andrew will be doing 2 and 4. So yes, we've started recording. Welcome, I'm Alex Foster. I am one of the hosts for this evening as the editor of the Oxford Student newspaper. Cool. Okay. We're going to get started with question number 1. You have 2 minutes each, and if you run over in terms of time, we'll say time's up, and then you've got kind of 15 seconds to kind of finish your remarks. So without further ado, starting with Marcin, the question is, why are you the best candidate for the president of the Oxford Student Union? Tell us more about what you can bring to the Student Union and what your main policies and objectives are. Starting with Marcin. Go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alex. Just in the way of an introduction, I'm Marcin. I'm originally from Poland, and I'm doing law at St. Anne's. In terms of why I'm running, I think we have a fundamental problem with DSU. No one knows what it is, where it is, or what it does, or who is in it. So I thought that we would need to have some kind of a fundamental rethinking of what DSU actually does and how it can best support JCRs and MCRs. At present, £500,000 every single year is spent on just DSU staff. And I think that we can spend that money much better by supporting common rooms, by funding societies, and by spending some of that money on welfare. And as someone who's been both the chair of the student council and one of the student trustees at DSU, I think I'd know how to do it from day one, as opposed to having to learn how DSU works from the inside over a couple of different months. And in terms of my priorities, I have a couple of different areas I want to focus on. Firstly, I want to focus on access and student support. I think we need to diversify and revise the curriculums that we have. And same goes for exams, given that they've been going on for some subjects in the ways that they've been organized for centuries now. For my subject, for example, we are the only university in the country that stayed with the traditional 3-4-hour exams during the pandemic. Every single university in the UK, aside from Oxford, has reformed them to suit the pandemic climate much better. We didn't. I think that's something where DSU can actually improve. I want to help international graduate students. I would lobby for financial aid for grad international students, for graduate accommodation, and between term events. So DSU doesn't forget that half of its electorate is not just undergrads who leave Oxford outside of terms. I would fight for clubs and societies. I would make sure that we can have direct funding from DSU, any kind of admin support, and that we organize societies first throughout the year and not just at the beginning of freshers, so that people who didn't have a chance or for some reason didn't join societies at the beginning of the Oxford journey still have a chance to do that. And I would make sure to work on representation community as well. Just last 15 seconds. I'm going to visit as many JCRs and MCRs as they physically can if elected. And I'm going to make sure to do work on DSU this way, as opposed to just running endless consultations that no one ever fills out. Thanks a lot.
Cool, brilliant. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to Richard Mifsud. Again, the question is, why are you the best candidate for the presidency of the Oxford Student Union? Tell us more about what you can bring to the Student Union and what your main policies and objectives are. Richard, you've got 2 minutes.
Hello, and I am Richard Mifsud, part of the Empty Chair campaign. I'd like to introduce my campaign manager, Fesby Bear, who of course is sitting there. Just to say, I am running again like I did last year on the grounds that if elected, I will not take up the position of president, because I don't think that I'm worth actually £21,000, which is what the salary is of a president. And we spend this every single year, and every single year we get to this stage of the year and wonder what on earth last year's president did. And then we think about the Oxford SU for the 1 week during the election campaign and then proceed not to think about it for another year. And so I would like to change this cycle and just not have a paid president next year and realise that actually we probably wouldn't notice much of a difference. Now, if you have no interest in student politics, if any of you do happen to be listening to this, great, we've got a photo competition for you to do. We're looking for the best picture of an empty chair. And if you email it to empty.chair.oxsu.president.2022@gmail.com, the person with the best empty chair picture will win a prize. It will be a £2 box of chocolates. For those of you who really do think that the SU are brilliant and actually do some stuff, great. You know what, there's 5 excellent candidates, and I'm having had a brief look through all their manifestos. They all look brilliant. And do go and vote for them. I don't mind at all. But unfortunately, I think that given the fact that 500 people have voted for me in the past, and given the fact that we have such a low election turnout of about 25%, which was a record best last year, I believe, it seems a shame that we are spending £21,000. And I don't think that we should be paying for a sabbatical position. And so my position is that if elected, I would ask for that money to be reallocated to something else and not take up a position myself. And that is my election campaign pledge to you. And I'm the only one bolshy enough to do it. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. That was absolutely bang on 2 minutes, Richard. Good job. So now we're going to move on to Kelsey. Again, Kelsey, you've got 2 minutes. I will, of course, tell you if you run over. And your question is, why are you the best candidate for the presidency of the Oxford Student Union? Tell us more about what you can bring to the Student Union and what your main policies and objectives are. Kelsey, you've got 2 minutes.
Thanks so much, Alex. Hey, everyone. I'm Kelsey. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a second-year PPEist at Trinity. And I'm running for president of the SU because I know that, like never before, we have an opportunity to develop an SU that is ready and able to fight back against a university. Look, we've had 2 years of disrupted education due to COVID, and at every turn, the university has demonstrated time and time again that reputation, prestige, and profit come above student welfare. You only have to look at how they responded to allegations of sexual misconduct last year, how they've treated vulnerable students and disabled students with the return to in-person lectures this year. It's so clear that the university does not care about our well-being. And I believe that we have the ability and the need to develop an SU that is prepared to stand up and fight for the rights of every single student. I've set out in my manifesto some broad pillars about how we achieve this. I won't go into massive details about all of them now because there's a lot there, but we need to fight for free and fair education, for lecture capture, and for accommodation policies that make sense for all students, from working class backgrounds to disabled students. We need to make sure that we're focusing on the well-being and the mental health of students. That's enforceable work caps per term. We need to make sure our SU is engaged in the local community as well. That's working with trade unions for post-grad teaching staff, And we also need to make sure that our SU is at the heart of national student organising as well, with NUS and the movement born out of the rent strikes across the country last year. I think I'm the best candidate to help the SU develop into this. I have experience as co-chair of the Young Greens of England and Wales, so I've worked with student groups across the country to mobilise activists in universities and in local communities. And I've also got experience on effectively a trustee board of a national political party. I have extensive media experience fighting for free tuition and for equality of education for disabled students, and fighting as well for trans liberation in that media place. And I think that's really important that we touch on that as well. But in short, I hope that I can be the candidate that you will trust to develop the SU into that force. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kelsey. All right, we're going to move on to Enrico. Again, Enrico, you've got 2 minutes, and your question is, why are you the best candidate for the position of President of the Oxford Student Union? Tell us more about what you can bring to the Student Union and what your main policies and objectives are when you're ready.
Well, thank you, Alex. So, well, as many people point out in this call, actually, the issue with the current key issue with the Student Union is not only in terms of, bringing the Student Union out there to actually meet the students, but the fact that many people don't even know what the Student Union is about. So in that sense, I strongly feel that we need to reprioritize students or internal bureaucracy and political divisions in that sense. In the sense, there has been a focus in the past, in my opinion, over some divisive campaigns which have actually very little impact upon people. We need to have a rational approach to the student union, to the way the money is allocated, to make best use of that budget and tackle the issue that actually students care about. And not only that, but also in terms of reprioritize and rethink the way we also reach out with students, and especially with single colleges. I mean, the fact itself, some colleges such as Christchurch decided to leave the student union themselves, I believe, is telling of the fact, the great distance that is perceived between JCR, MCLRs, and the student union. And this is an issue which needs to be tackled. And I feel, in that sense, that if I will be elected president, that will be the focus on my tenure, especially in terms of pushing what is effectively our issues for the common person over political ideology, which I feel should have no place in the student union itself. Especially in terms of an agenda, work agenda, which have been perpetrated for many years at this point. I think that the student union ultimately should facilitate the expression and full potential of all the students. However, the organization cannot rely on inertia for this, and we can afford that to be possible. Hence, what I will therefore say in conclusion is that we do need rational problem solving over political ideology.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to Otto next. Otto, you've got 2 minutes, and your question is, why are you the best candidate for the position of Oxford SU? Tell us more about what you can bring to the student union and what your main policies and objectives are. Whenever you're ready, Otto.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone, and greetings to everyone who's watching this at home. My name is Otto Barrow. My pronouns are he or they, and outside the SU buildings, I'm a third-year PPEist and Anvi's neighbour. I really love Oxford, the societies, reading, sandstone quads, but above all, the people who I've had the pleasure of meeting and befriending along the way. But in my time here, I've also seen the ways it really needs to improve. I think the SU has the potential to radically improve the lives of Oxford students, and from my lengthy first-hand experience in Oxford societies and the SU in particular, I think I'm the right person with the right passion to make that change for the better. I'm currently the Chair of Council, was NUS delegate last year, and also serve as the undergraduate divisional rep for social sciences. I think that the SU has 3 key issues facing it: ignorance, inefficiency, and a mixed reputation. Not enough people know what the SU is and how it can help them. The SU is inefficient. It's filled with people doing great work, but many projects are stuck in the pipeline without results. And the SU is not taken as seriously as it should be. Frankly, stupid policies such as the ban on clapping and the recommendation of jazz hands instead undermine its credibility while putting a sticking plaster when a bandage is needed when it comes to issues like inclusivity. The SU's role, in my opinion, is to improve and support the lives of Oxford students through facilitating inter-college collaboration with JCRs and MCRs and the National Union of Students. The organisation needs to be better presented as a serious and effective organisation, and many services and support systems advertise to the students that it's intended to help. The SU needs to refocus on the issues that matter, prioritising problems ranging from sexual assault to the environment, while also solving issues with simple solutions that have obvious answers, but that people aren't properly engaged with, such as the ban on trashing. Thank you.
Brilliant. Sorry, I was on mute there. You were actually under time, Otto. I'm very impressed. Okay, I'm going to move on to Michael. Final question for this round. And again, it is, why are you the best candidate for the presidency of the Oxford Student Union? Tell us more about what you can bring to the student union and what your main policies and objectives are. You've got 2 minutes, Michael, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Alex. It's a true honor to be here today. In explaining my response to this question, I'll go to talk about why I'm running for the role, my experience in getting here, what ways in which I feel like we can tackle the issues I see within ESUs, and why I think I'm the guy to do that. Firstly, I feel incredibly fortunate to be sitting before you here today as someone who was on a unique program and an opportunity Oxford program to get here. And I was very very lucky insofar as my first, second, third year at Oxford was riddled with lots of personal problems, things like mental health issues, issues with like getting disability support properly, in financial catastrophes I had to go through. And I was very lucky in being supported in different ways in these issues. And given those experiences, I decided to get much more involved in my college ACR as a disability rep and also as academic equal opportunity officer. And then this year decided to take a much more broader step and a university-wide by getting involved with Disability Campaign and Class Act. Now, I recognize that there's many issues that we need to solve, but there's no mandate which I feel the SU can force change with colleges and with the university itself if we do not have the support of the students. And I think that we need to combat SU apathy first. And the way in which we combat SU apathy is showing and demonstrating to students that we are achieving things. And that allows us to basically bring on policies to the table and be able to have that force to encourage university leaders to commit to change. And one way in which you can do that is to build trust by ensuring that policies that we pledge are done, but more specifically, holding the university to account when they use bureaucracy and processes to sidestep things that we care about. And I've laid out in my manifesto holistic access issues that we need to tackle, from thinking about streamlining bureaucracy, better mental health and pastoral support for individuals that have different needs, to making sure that we have a better understanding of neurodiversity. And I think I'm the guy to do that, specifically because I have vast experience both working for a national organization in mind and also working within university, and I hope that that helps me in the role if I am elected.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of your questions there, guys. Some, not really sure what to say. Nice ideas for the student union. I will now pass over to Andrew, who will be asking you guys another question in reverse order. So that is starting with Michael and ending with Marcin. Andrew, whenever you're ready.
Right, thank you, Alex. So yeah, as Alex mentioned, just a reminder of the order. It's Michael, Otto, Enrico, Kelsey, Richard, and then Marcin. So the next question, we're diving a bit more into details here. One issue that has been particularly contentious recently has been the issue of sexual assault or harassment. We've seen initiatives to help address this issue, but we are far from there yet. What has worked so far, in your opinion, and what would you change? Just as a reminder, this question has a time limit of 1 minute, and we'll start once again, or I guess we'll go back to Michael.
Yeah, I think what has worked so far, in my opinion, is the ability for students to access peer support in form of either the welfare or campaigns such as It Happens Here, but that's not enough, and that's why we need to do more. I feel from my conversations with friends that a big issue is feeling as if when you report things as serious as sexual assault, nothing's been done about them, but also the processes in which you expect for some justice to be made, you're not informed of. And I think a way to do this, given that colleges have different policies regarding their own standing orders, is to streamline impose a streamlined process in which the victim or those who have gone through stuff are informed immediately about what options they have, kept in the loop throughout the process, and also triggers to external services such as GPs, police, that allows them to take external services should they need be, so they feel as if their voice has been heard and that the concerns have been taken seriously, and perhaps the perpetrator might be properly punished or responded to.
So, thank you. That was perfectly on time. We'll move on to Otto.
Excellent. Thank you for the question. So I think it's interesting that in terms of what's been working well, I think a lot of different colleges and a lot of different institutions around the university have created a lot of really good initiatives, which I think definitely represent a sort of step towards trying to sort of resolve some of these problems. I find it amusing that the previous speaker, Michael, didn't mention an institution that he's been quite involved with in the form of the Oxford Union, which obviously rare to have this mentioned at the Student Union, in that things like initiatives such as the Ask for Angela scheme and making sure things like anti-spiking glasses are in place. And so one thing I would like to do if I was elected is to make sure that every college has an anti-spiking policy and that every student bar has an Ask for Angela scheme. I think these are two very concrete steps that can lead that obviously aren't enough to necessarily solve all these problems, but can definitely leave a step in the right direction. In addition to this, I think one of the big issues with things like sexual harassment is the fact that every college has their own different policy, and the procedures for when it comes to, say, an event where two people from two different colleges have got into a situation, there doesn't seem to be that much sort of communication or awareness of what the various structures are involved. And I think one thing I'd want to do is mostly build awareness about
15 seconds,
how this
sorry.
work. Sorry?
Sorry, 15 seconds.
15 seconds. And I think trying to make sure people are aware of that and work out where we can change things where they're not fit to standard.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Enrico. Sorry, I think you're muted.
Apologize for that. I obviously learned that after 2 years, but anyway. So, well, as some people pointed out before me, the whole idea behind the student union and is commitment to tackle sexual harassment. My opinion is that what has been working well so far in that sense has been the campaign against sexual violence. I think it's good. The student union has brought about information material across different colleges, and there's a helpline over there. People ready to help. Anybody might need any advice. However, I don't think that is enough. And the reason why is that, as Otto pointed out before me, there is discrepancy between different colleges in the way sexual violence is tackled. And I think this is a very perplexing way of tackling an issue which seems very much structural. I think the student union should have a much stronger partnership with the Thames Valley Police and make sure that students across all colleges get the same high quality treatment they deserve in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I think in terms of what's been working well, I think what I would say is that it's been really heartening to see students coming together in light of some of the really horrific things that came to light last year. At Balliol, for example, with Balliol Community for Safety, and with students organising themselves. But it's abhorrent that we've got to the point where students don't trust the university and don't trust the colleges to look after them. I think some of the things that have been mentioned, like Ask Angela schemes and making sure that anti-spiking cup condoms, for example, are available widely and free of charge for everyone is super important. They're really concrete things that can happen. But again, it's a demonstration of colleges and the wider university putting their reputation over the well-being of students. And the student union has a duty to advocate for students, to hold the university to account, and to hold individual colleges to account to make sure they're not able to do that. As I say, it's been great to see things like It Happens Here and just students organising, together to tackle this. But we need to do more. This is not good enough, and it's not acceptable.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Richard.
Yes, it is, of course, a very serious subject, and it is right that the university and the colleges have all been looking at it. And it's right to notice the disparity that there are a lot of colleges. One of the bizarre things of being a collegiate university is that each college has its own set of rules and its own way of dealing with stuff. My question that I'm going to ask to you is, what has the Oxford SU actually done anything to help this? Now, certainly the student advice service they have is great, but does it really need a paid president to help this? And would a paid president make any difference in this role? And sadly, I'm going to have to argue, no, I don't think it would. And that is why I stand on this empty chair campaign. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Finally, we have Marcin.
So this is a bit of a sensitive issue for me because I have some friends who went through the process as victims, and I know that they didn't feel supported at all, either by the system as a whole or by their individual colleges. So obviously there's a lot that needs to be improved. I know that the president, Anvi, and the VP woman have worked hard on their anti-spiking campaign with CLAPS and the wider Oxford community. So I'm confident that there's something already happening by the SU, but obviously we need to do more. I agree with the previous speakers who said that obviously one of the biggest problems is the different procedures across the colleges. I don't think it's fair that someone who experiences sexual assault or harassment at one college is treated differently than someone who experiences the very same thing, but just happens to go to another college. And I think SU here is well positioned to work with the entire Oxford community, from clubs through different nightclubs to the police, as someone mentioned before. So I think SU is basically the only student group that is able to work with all of those Oxford-based communities, as opposed to just working individually at the college level. So I think that's what I would focus on if I was elected president. Thanks.
All right, thank you. That was it for question 2. And now for a third question, I'll hand it back to Alex.
Thank you, Andrew. Some good questions there. So once again, we're going in the forward order. So that will be Marcin, Richard, Kelsey, Enrico, Otto, and then finally Michael. My question for the candidates is, the student union are, if at all, known for having little to no negotiation power with colleges, with these colleges instead choosing to work through JCRs to effect change. Notably, the student union was unable to create a lasting, standardised plan across all colleges for a return to Oxford University in Hillary of 2020 in the COVID lockdown. How would you ensure colleges listen to the student union and not just ignore your efforts? We'll start with Marcin.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest problems you're facing. So the SU is seen as trying to compete with JCRs and MCRs as opposed to trying to support them. Obviously, there are some issues where JCRs and MCRs are a better place to negotiate with the colleges, and this could be potentially one of those. But in terms of things that affect all students in the same way, so obviously returning to university would be one of those issues. I think that the SU should basically play a supporting role. We should make sure that JCRs and MCRs are kept well informed. And if we actually focus on speaking to students, then I think the university would basically have to recognize that ESU is the authoritative group here to represent everyone. Obviously, it can't be done by just SABs going to the ESU and telling them that this is what the students think, without actually being able to provide any kind of evidence that that's the case. So if I was president, I would make sure, as I mentioned before, to go to every single JCR, every single MCR, speak to individual students from different colleges, different backgrounds, different degrees, different everything. And once that happens, once I know that I've actually consulted with all of them on their different needs, for example, on things such as returning to university, then the university would have to recognize that the consultation has been done properly, as opposed to just sending some kind of an online form asking people for their preferences, which both the university and the students know that no one is going to fill and no one cares about. So I think that's the biggest problem. University knows that ESU isn't representative because it doesn't even try to talk to students. So if elected, I would make sure to do that. And in turn, university would have to recognize our authority.
Brilliant. Okay, went slightly over time there. Going to move on to Richard Mifsud. Again, you've got 1 minute, and your question is, how would you ensure colleges listen to the student union and not just ignore your efforts? Go.
I mean, I can't agree more. Why would colleges bother listening to the Oxford SU? The JCRs are representative of students at their college. They listen to them and tend to do it in a fairly apolitical way as well, which is nice. And then you look at who's left at the Oxford SU. The problem is that the Oxford SU doesn't really have a good role in that respect. We're not involved in the day-to-day rent negotiations, even though you could argue we should be. And actually, it has such poor representation of students as a whole. 75% of students don't really notice us or care about us in at all. And so actually, yeah, I totally agree. This is why I'm running the empty chair campaign. I don't think it's worth the money that is currently spent on the Oxford SU to be spent on it. So I think that we should give the £21,000 to other more useful purposes. And that's why I do the empty chair campaign. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Perfectly on time. So now we're going to move on to Kelsey. Kelsey, how would you ensure colleges listen to the student union and not just ignore your efforts?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think this is a really important one, and it's about making sure that JCR representatives and MCR representatives are involved in the SU. I think someone before mentioned about keeping JCR and MCR reps in the loop, and I think that's the wrong way of framing it. I think the SU is made up of these, really passionate and really great people from JCR committees and MCR committees. And they should be feeding into what the SU does, such that when it comes to things like the return to colleges during the pandemic, which was a unique situation in itself, and I don't want to put too much focus on it, there can be coordinated efforts from the SU, but through JCRs and MCRs, you know, people putting their views forward to the SU, coordinating a strategy, and then delivering that across colleges. We can't necessarily change where the power lies. Power lies, you know, so often with individual colleges, which makes universal change really difficult. But we can, as students, come together, work together, organise, strategise, cooperate, and make sure that those changes are implemented universally at every college if we work together. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kelsey. Okay, we're going to move on to Enrico next. How would you ensure that, well, let me find the question. How would you ensure colleges listen to the student union and not just ignore your efforts? Go.
Well, thank you, Alex. So, well, what I would like to say in that regard is that effectively, why do this brings us back to the question in the sense that why effectively the student union does not have enough influence on JCR committees. And well, I think the reason why this does not happen is because there is a lack of trust. You know, trust from the side of the student union. It says that JCRs, MCRs do not trust us to take the right decisions to go on with our campaign. So my opinion on the matter is that we need to start back from ground zero. It says that we need to rebuild trust, JCRs and MCRs, student societies across the board, to make sure that our voice is heard. But this way, this can only be achieved if in the first place we present some serious campaigns, we present some serious aims, and we can deliver results. Because if these three things are not possible, then it is impossible to establish trust in turn. And I do believe that that's the way forward to move the NCRs. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Nearly done. We're going to move on to Otto next. Otto, as ever, your question is, how would you ensure colleges listen to the student union and not just ignore your efforts?
Thank you. I think the real question we should be asking here is how should the SU be listening to JCRs and MCRs? Frankly, the SU exists because there are, frankly, issues which affect us as a sort of student body. But the thing is, when it comes to organisations, it always makes sense to try to solve things at the most local level. And I think that's one of the things that makes Oxford such a special place. I think the fact that you have so many different colleges which have very different approaches to doing things, and I think maintaining that is really important. And I think the SU, I think we should think of the SU as a body to try to facilitate what these individual colleges are doing. And obviously there are going to be economies of scale when we're dealing with issues like trying to decarbonise Oxford, when we're dealing with issues like trying to tackle sexual harassment, when we're dealing with issues when it comes to exam arrangements. These things obviously need to be done at a university level, and it's not just a question of getting sort of colleges to solve these problems within themselves. However, what we need to do is think about listening to JCRs and MCRs first. And I think sort of doing that by sort of things like streamlining what sort of student council's doing to make sure that sort of being sort of active roles, Prescom was saying, and I think that's what we need to be focusing on. And I think that's the only way of getting colleges to listen to us.
Cool. Okay. Thank you very much. And finally, we're going to move on to Michael. Michael, how would you ensure colleges listen to the student union and not just ignore your efforts?
Yeah, so I think first I'd like to highlight the different parties and stakeholders in this. There's colleges, their bodies, there's the universities and their communities, and then there's us, the SU, trying to basically enact policies that somehow streamline our work concurrently across these three independent people, which is incredibly difficult. And everyone's highlighted the main issues. And one thing I want to build upon is this trust part. And we have to build trust between colleges themselves, but also within the students in the common rooms. And how do we do that? We do that basically by being accessible, being around, being also reliable in the fact that basically when there are issues that affect a certain college, the JCR reps in RepCom or in PressCom believe that they can come to us, but also we can be proactive in checking in and see that things are going on. That allows them to allows the college to feel trust in us, but then also allows us to basically be able to have the information and feedback to colleges to enact policies. And once we build us trust and we're reliable in a sense, that creates a cyclical nature in which students will start to believe in the SU and believe that the voices will be listening to us and that we got their back. And that's how I feel like we can effectively affect change.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Michael. Cool. So again, I will now pass over to my fellow gorgeous editor-in-chief, Andrew Wang. and they'll be in reverse order. So starting with Michael, then Otto, Enrico, Kelsey, Richard, and Marcin. Andrew, whenever you're ready.
Right. For our fourth question, I think each of you are going to get, depending on, I guess, the question, each of you are going to get somewhat different questions. Some of these have been submitted by students. Others are based more on your manifestos. As Alex mentioned, we're going in forward order again, and we'll start with Michael. Your question is, of the around 25,000 students at Oxford, over half are postgrads. What do you think are the main issues faced by postgrads, and how would you address these issues?
So I happen to be a mature student in a way identify with postgrad issues, given the fact that I suffer from intense imposter syndrome, recognizing that I was an age bracket older than most undergrad students. When I speak to postgrads and the issues they face, it's almost like not feeling integrated within the university environment, feeling like an add-on, and both on a social scale, but also on an institutional scale. Universities sort of like treat them in terms of policies they enact, not in the same way they treat policies that affect students, such as issues with like tuition fees and so on, but also events. Postgrads almost, from my understanding, feel like the events, there's like the bifurcation between undergrad events and postgrad event, which shouldn't be the case. So I feel like trying to create some community within that is the way forward. And the way in which I want to do that, especially for social issues, is to create a much more centralized platform for social events, society events going on, so that doesn't just impede those who are on Facebook or Instagram, because we know first years, for example, didn't have don't use Facebook, and allow
15 seconds.
Allow different age groups and different people from different backgrounds to basically link together and treat those issues.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Otto. And your question is, and this is submitted by a student. So you mentioned reversing a ban on clapping, and they dispute that this ban technically exists, contrary to what the national press reported. Additionally, the motion that passed in Michaelmas 2019, week 1, makes the student council adopt BSL clapping, which replaces normal clapping as the default, and mandates sabbatical offers to encourage this change in university committees where it seems appropriate. And I suppose the student wants you to address this conflict in, I guess, what they perceive to be the facts.
Excellent. Thank you for the question. I think this is something I really want to elaborate on, so I'm really glad this issue has been raised. Obviously limited to 500 words in the manifesto, so I wasn't able to go into as much detail as I'd like to. However, I think the issue with the supposed ban on clapping, or at least the policies as it's sort of been put out, is I think it's one of the sort of classic examples of how the SU is out of touch with students. The fact that people think there's a ban on clapping when actually it's an encouragement of BSL clapping. I think another thing is the fact that, having served as the chair of council, the wider issue here is that meetings and other events don't cater to people who have specific needs, have anxieties, or are non-hearing in any other ways. So actually having such a policy where the SU is pretending to cater to these groups while actually not doing anything substantive to make sure that they either sort of like feel included in meetings and can actually sort of actively participate. And I think I want to change this, because frankly we need a solution which actually includes people, rather than just ticks a box and say, oh yes, we've done this. And that's what I want to make my focus of the SU. I probably wouldn't have used such strong language if I was writing my manifesto again, and I'm really glad to know more about this. However, I think this explains the thinking behind the policy and general direction. I think this applies to other areas as well.
Thank you, Otto. Next, we have Enrico. Your question is, what initiatives have, or you mentioned in your manifesto that you believe that some initiatives have pushed divisive political ideology instead of addressing the most important issues of the day. Which initiatives are these, in your opinion? And how would you change the operations of the student union to be more suitable to the goals that you are going after?
Well, Andrew, I think that this whole idea of a ban on clapping actually perfectly exemplifies what I was talking about in my manifesto, in the sense that what we're actually doing here is wasting money which has been allocated by the university to tackle issues which are practically non-existent, in the sense that, not in the sense that, of course, social anxiety is not an issue. I mean, I suffer myself from social anxiety, but I can tell you the ban on clapping is not going to do anything about it. These are only pretexts, in the sense that we cannot possibly be taken seriously by colleges as long as we focus on issues which are either non-existent or, in all honesty, just make the whole student union just sound ridiculous to the wider public. I mean, this whole thing about the ban on clapping, I have to be honest with you, when I first read about it, I said, didn't read in the Oxford Press, I read it through some American media. I mean, this whole thing is just brings this whole society, university into dispute for absolutely no rational reason. And another campaign, which in my opinion has been as good as aims, because also ban on clapping itself, I can see the aim, but it's not necessarily good. Is, for instance, the class campaign. It says that, of course, there is a concern about people disadvantaged people. Yes, is that the way forward? I believe not.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Kelsey. Your question is, your manifesto mentions a focus on welfare and mental health as a key objective. Could you dive deeper into how you would work towards these goals?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for the question. The current team of SABs have done a great job of getting more money and more funding into the counselling service, making sure it's available for students when they need it. But there's always more we can be doing, and I think mental health needs to be seen in a broader sense, and welfare needs to be seen in a broader sense. So this is looking at things like enforceable work caps. So by that, I mean making sure that we're not overwhelming students when departments don't speak to each other or module leaders don't speak to each other. We're not overwhelming students with unmanageable workloads. We continue to advocate for a reading week in terms, and I know its campaign's gone on forever, but I think, it's so important to looking at welfare and mental health. I think as well, it's really important that we look at underrepresented groups. And I do want to touch on what's been talked about here about the ban on clapping. I know it doesn't sound relevant, but I think it's really disappointing to hear candidates dismiss a motion that was put forward by the Disability Campaign and by disabled students who, represent themselves and who put this forward, and dismiss it as divisive or unhelpful. I think it's really upsetting to see that, underrepresented groups are being dismissed because they think that people think it makes the SU look ineffective or unhelpful. So it's looking at that as well and pushing for improvements in trans rights and against transphobia in the university, all those kinds of things. It's a really broad topic. I hope that's covered some of it.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Kelsey. Next up, we have Richard. Your question is, how would you best use the £21,000 that would be freed up if you're elected as president?
Well, so this is an interesting question because, to be honest with you, I can't specify it, and I will openly admit I can only say that I won't take up a position and recommend to the university and the Oxford SU that they should use it for something else. I cannot force them to use it for something else. Having said that, £21,000 would go quite a long way in terms of increasing the Oxford bursaries, and the Oxford bursaries already provide some support, but providing an additional bursary for people who are already here who've fallen into financial hardship and aren't getting any support from the college that they need would be a very useful thing. The second thing is, as have already been previously mentioned, I mean, the supporting the mental welfare, the psychological counselling, the services that exist university-wide would also be incredibly helpful as well, and possibly actually to help expand the student advice service as well. Those are the areas that I think would be best used.
All right, thank you. Last but not least, we have Marcin. Your manifesto states that you want to use, that you want to redirect some of the 500,000 plus in staff salaries on student societies, events, and scholarships. Are you planning to produce this money from reducing the number of staff or cutting their salaries? And if so, how exactly would you implement this? As in, how many staff would you fire, or how much would you reduce salaries, and how would you make these decisions?
Thanks so much, Andrew, and I'm so happy you actually mentioned this issue, because unlike proposing that we have an empty chair for the president, which is actually not legally possible. If someone doesn't take the job of a president, sorry, I'm still speaking.
Oh, sorry.
If someone
I didn't
doesn't take
realise I
the
was
job of a
muted.
president, then another one would have to be elected. It's not legally possible for that money not to be spent on the president's salary. So we shouldn't really talk about how we spend that money because it's just not possible. And in terms of my proposal, I think we need to realize that there are staff members at the SU who are paid up to £100,000 a year for one position. Most of those positions are unelected. So obviously I'm not going to fire anyone within the first month or 2 months because we need to make sure that people have enough time to find proper jobs after they leave the SU. But in the same way that many societies have student volunteers who do so much of the work, we can have some of that at the SU. We can have some part-time appointments, and we just need to make sure that the SU is actually run by students and for students, and not by 20 or so staff members who, in most cases, never went to Oxford, don't really understand the collegiate system, and who are trying their best, and they're doing fantastic work for the tools that they've been given, but it's still not enough. I think we need to just make sure the SU is actually run by students. So reducing some of those posts, reducing some of those salaries, and just making sure that students do as much of the work as is actually possible. And I think we don't really need to spend £500,000 every year on staff salaries. We can do anything we want with them. We can do scholarships, we can do society funding, which is something that actually every other university and every other SU in the country is already doing. So I think just literally anything would be a better use of that money.
All right, thank you. That's it for question 4. I think for our final, fifth and final question, I'm handing it back to Alex to end things off.
Brilliant. Can I just remind all candidates to keep their microphones turned off, maybe when they're not speaking. So yeah, we're going back to the forward order. So that's Marcin, Richard, Kelsey, Enrico, Otto, and then Michael. I thought we'd finish with a fun one. If you had to choose one presidential candidate other than yourself to vote for, who would it be and why? Starting with Marcin.
That's a tough one. So many great choices. I think I would probably vote for Otto, mostly because I know how hard he's been working as both chair of council, a role that I also shared before him, so I understand the difficulties it entails, and as someone who actually worked on different SU committees for a number of years now, both as divisional rep and as someone who's been on the rules committee and many other places. So that's a lot of work that goes unnoticed by students. And I know that he didn't do it for political reasons because, well, no one actually notices those jobs. So I know that he's committed enough to be able to do the job properly if he was elected. So I would vote for Otto. But I'm sure that all of the other candidates are equally great. So it's just a question I'm answering out of necessity as opposed to out of preference. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much. Going to move on to Richard.
Oh, bloody see, who I would pick would be Fesby Bear, because who wouldn't be a better candidate? Fesby Bear is a particularly great person because he is willing to suffer the hardship of not sitting on a chair for a whole week just to support a campaign and an idea. And he has been finding his backside has been getting incredibly sore, and he feels incredibly sad that he's not been able to sit on a chair all this time. But he wants you to send in a photograph as well and to support him out usurping me because he thinks that he would do a better job than I would. And so not only that, it's that he's got the full support of my campaign team, including Depressed Moose, Tiger, Bouncy Camel, all of those people who would also willingly, immediately, what's the word I'm looking for, renegade over to his side. So yes, Fesby Bear is obviously the answer.
Brilliant. So we've got one vote for Otto and one vote for Thespy Bear. Who's next? Kelsey, if you vote for Thespy Bear, it's looking like it's looking like he could be winning it. So yeah, Kelsey, you've got a minute. Who would you vote for president and why?
I wouldn't want to be the tiebreaker, but yeah, I mean, as it's been said already, there are some fantastic candidates, and I think everyone would do a great job. But I think my vote would go to Otto. I think it's a really strong platform, and I think for me, what really counts is that you've got a really thorough and well demonstrated understanding of how the SU works, and I think that's so important, making sure that you're going into a role understanding the structures, understanding the students, understanding what's important, and knowing that you can be effective and get things done. And I think that's just really exciting. But as I say, I've only had a chance to see manifestos today, so there's so many fantastic ideas amongst the candidates running, and I think a lot of people would do a really good job in sort of certain areas. So yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thank you for your answer. Going to move on to Enrico. Who would you vote for as presidential candidate and why? You've got 1 minute.
Well, I'm very attentive about the bear, not gonna lie, but I'm a bit more serious than that, so I'll probably just go for Marcin. And reason being, I think we to some extent we agree on some issues, and I've been knowing him for quite a long time now, and I can assure I know that this person has been around for a very long time. He knows the student societies, the various organizations very well, and I'm sure he will do a very good job in that terms, and especially in terms of restoring trust and making sure to build up the proper connections with the whole student community.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Going to move on to Otto. Otto, you're not allowed to vote for yourself. So who would you vote for as presidential candidate and why?
Oh, I'm seeing Thesby Bear waving in the background. But if I have to choose another official candidate, I think I would probably choose either. Can I choose multiple candidates? Actually, I would choose everyone, obviously. And I think one thing I would seriously do if I was elected would be to consult with all the other candidates and work out how we can sort of implement some of their ideas into creating a sort of plan. Because frankly, I think the thing with an organisation as big as the student union is we need as many ideas as possible, and we need as many people who are passionate about trying to deliver them. I think if I'm trying to answer the question, I'd probably pick either Marcin or Michael, given that I've worked with both of them in various different roles. Marcin, I know, has a comprehensive knowledge of how the student union works, and when I was starting to get involved, told me a lot about all the different hidden committee structures, which I wasn't aware of. And of course, Michael, I'm aware of his determination, having worked with him in other organisations, and know that the fact that he's managed to stay on and is so passionate would be able to do that. Although I could probably say that about all the candidates, but these are the two I know the best and that I can speak the best about.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And finally, Michael, who would you vote for as presidential candidate and why?
Yeah, based on manifestos and based on the performance in this Hustings, I have to say, even in the election, I'm blown away, but I'm probably going to end up voting for Kelsey. And I think it's just a recognition of how he's cognizant of the issues that students care about. He seems like someone who comes across as someone is not afraid to get their hands dirty. In the manifesto, you can see that he talks about what he's done so far as a green campaigner, as someone who's gets involved in homeless street action, and basically playing a part in the community. And I think that the SU needs someone who basically is active, and they can see in that kind of leadership is what's going to help combat SU apathy, which I'm very, very passionate about doing. And I think the climate action concern is something that it's close to all our hearts, and our hearts are our generations afterwards, and clearly someone who cares about that, and his policies for welfare, improving welfare and well-being is very important. And I think a leader with a big vision, and that big vision of wanting to build a national student movement is going to be exciting for the Oxford community, and I think that's really going to hopefully inspire some real buzz around what the SU stands for and what it can achieve.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, thanks for answering our 5 questions, guys. Really appreciate let me try that again. We really appreciate all of you coming. Yeah, that is the end of the Hustings. It will be available online shortly. I've been your host, Alex Foster, and Andrew, you can say something, Andrew.
Yeah, of course. I'm Andrew, the other host. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you guys taking the time, and good luck on the rest of your campaign.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. Alice, you can now stop the recording.